Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Rees, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome to our lovely guest today, Jenni Dutton. Hi Jenni.
Hello, Sue.
It's lovely to speak to you, Jenni. We were just having a bit of a laugh there before I hit record that it's taken me a while to manage to pin you down and for us to have our chat, but I'm so pleased that this is going on today. So thank you so much, Jenni. That's fabulous.
Thank you.
Right, everyone, I've got a quick bio here from Jenni so you can understand a bit more about her. Jenni Dutton lives and works in Somerset, where she settled after a peripatetic early life. She trained in fine art at St Martin's and Byam Shaw School of Art in London. She now explores issues around time and memory, identity and loss through the subject of the female form, experimenting with different approaches including mixed media, textiles, sculpture and painting. Her preoccupation with the complexities of ageing and the mother-daughter relationship can be seen in Dementia Darnings, large-scale portraits in wool and threads. This has led her to now exploring her own ageing in the Absurd Sewn Selfies. Jenni has undertaken many residencies in museums and various other institutions. Her work has been widely exhibited around the country and in Europe, in Dublin, and at the Textile Biennale in The Hague. And there are plans to show some work in Australia in 2022 and the USA this autumn, viruses permitting, of course. Her collection of pieces using human hair will be part of an exhibition about hair at the Horniman Museum next year. And you can find Jenni on her website, jennidutton.com, and you can find her on Twitter at Jenni Dutton and Instagram at Jenni Dutton 9342. There we are. Right then, Jenni, before we get too much into your episode, would you like to share with us what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Right, well, actually, lockdown came at quite a good time for me because I'm making a new piece, a new Dementia Darling, which I kind of said 2 or 3 years ago I'd never make another one. But I was approached by a gallery in Ohio in the USA.
Yeah.
It's a gallery attached to a hospital and it's a museum hospital, and they wanted a piece for their exhibition that's coming up in the autumn.
Right.
So and because all my other work at that time would be in a cathedral next year, I'm having to make a new piece. So it's very interesting going back to the Dementia Darnings and working on that kind of subject again. So I have that discipline to kind of keep me going. So I'm working on that at the moment.
That's quite interesting, as you say, and probably quite a challenge going back to something that possibly mentally you thought you'd finished.
Well, absolutely. And because I sent them a sort of series of images of my work.
Yeah.
Just to get a sense, because I thought if I'm going to make something specially, I might as well get a sense of what they would like that would work in with this mixed show.
Yes.
And he really liked the very early images of my mum. Because of the sort of, they were so positive and all the rest of it, sort of old-fashioned images. So I'm making a piece that's actually of her on her wedding day.
Right.
And it's very beautiful, but it's all in greys. And it's very different. It's very, very different from the normal way I work. I'm using completely different approach, which is quite a challenge, as in I'm just trying to work out if it will work, which is a bit of a risk, really. And also the risk is that it might be that the exhibition doesn't go ahead because it starts in October.
Right,
so,
yes.
I have to wait and see. I have to contact them at the end of this month and to find out what the situation is. So we'll see.
Yeah, and is this new piece, with it being part of the Dementia Darlings, it's in textiles as well?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Darnings is the kind of expression that a friend of mine named them the Darnings, and that's because it seemed to be about repair, sort of loss, repair, and because of the kind of technique I use, she sort of said, let's call them the Dementia Darlings, so I always have since then.
Oh, that's an absolutely fabulous name. Well done to your friend.
I know, it's really useful.
No, that's brilliant. Is it spoiling any surprises to give us a clue as to what you're trying to do new then?
Well, the thing is, when I'm making the large portraits, and they are very large, and I think this is what gives them their emotional strength.
Yes.
Because they're 130 by 90, which is quite large. So when I'm normally working, I grid up a photograph and I grid up the canvas, and I then roughly draw it all in with thread. I never use pencil or anything like that. It's all drawn in with thread, very roughly. And then I turn the whole thing upside down, and the photograph, and then I mask areas off. And from that point onwards, I don't look at the final thing till very near the end, and that can be 3 or 4 months down the line.
Wow.
And what I'm doing with this one, because the space is quite small and there's lots of veil and lilies and wedding dress and things, I decided not to do that. I decided to start on the face, work the face. It's all upside down. I never work the right way up.
Yeah.
So I've worked on the face, and then I'm kind of going out. So instead of working on the whole thing at once, if you could see me, I'm gesticulating here into the air. Yeah. I work on the whole thing. But this way, I'm just started with the eyes and the mouth and the nose, and I've worked out. And now I'm working. I've done the hair. And in fact, you can see this on my Instagram post. If anybody's interested, they could have a rundown. I have actually posted pictures of work in progress, which I have never done before.
Oh, well, there we are. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I don't know if I have on Twitter. Probably have. I can't remember. So that's why it's very different. So for this one, although what I tend to do is if I'm getting stuck with a piece, or getting stuck with it, or a bit bored with it, then I do mask areas off. And then I just work on one small area, which I find much more challenging and interesting. And then, you kind of unveil it and you check across just to see if it's the same kind of colours and tones and things.
Yeah, no, I think that's an absolutely fascinating approach to take. We might just come and dig back into that when we talk about techniques. But I mean, quite often people would mask areas off. If they're doing some beautiful, fine, delicate work, and it's a kind of keep it clean and stop it from getting spoilt kind of thing. But I don't think I've heard of anybody kind of deliberately masking areas off just so that to keep it kind of fresh or as a prize. Yes. I don't know.
Well, I don't want to know if it's an eye, a nose, or a mouth or whatever. I just don't want to know, because your preconceived ideas will come back and you'll say, oh no, a nose doesn't look like that. And in fact, the strange shadows that you find on a face and the weird reflections, in your logical head, it says, no, that's not right. But if you're just completely, it's working on the right-hand side of the brain, not the left-hand side. It's the intuitive side, not the logical, rational side.
I'm so glad that you explained that, because that now makes perfect sense. Combined with what you just said, these are large pieces.
Yes.
So, yes, it's not like it's a small piece. You think, oh, well, the face isn't going to match up. It's a large piece, and they are large, are these. So, that makes total sense now, because as you say, if you try and make it look like a nose, it's not going to look like a nose, is it?
No. And also because each shadow is quite a big shape, because they're so large.
Right, yes.
And if you, it just doesn't work. You start sort of working what you think is there, not what is there. And the whole point of me making this work is because it's about time, and it's about the family album, it's about photographs, and it's about the fact that the photograph is over in a second, and these pieces take me 4 months to make.
Right, yes.
So there's all sorts of other kind of ideas being sort of thrown around in the mix. And especially making the ones of my mum. I think if I had been able to look at the piece all the way through, I think I would have found it too difficult.
Yes.
Whereas people kind of ask me, because they have a sort of an emotional content, especially as she's declining, it would have been too hard. But as it is, when I would have a reveal, I would be kind of pretty shocked about what I saw, but I wasn't inhibited.
Yes.
I think I would have been inhibited if I had seen what I was making.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I do the unveil, I have still then loads and loads of work to do on it.
Yeah.
It's not like finished. It's got, I take loads out. Anyway, I'm talking techniques now.
Yes, okay, we can probably...
You asked me what gets me excited. It's obviously talking about my work.
Fabulous. Right, now you just mentioned there, Jenny, about virus lockdown and all the rest of it, and the ongoing impact that, as you say, you're making this piece and you don't even know what's going to happen with the exhibition, etc. Was there any other, I've kind of asked a few guests this as well, was there any other impacts that you felt because of, what's happened globally on your work or on you, basically?
Oh, goodness. Well, yes. On me personally, yes. Terrible sense of loss and sadness and anxiety, huge amount of anxiety. But I also, I'm very involved in Extinction Rebellion.
Ah, right.
So I have been making large banners for them, large textile banners, as in the traditional kind of form of a textile banner.
Yes.
And we've been using those. And this whole virus thing and the whole pandemic and the whole way that we're treating nature has become something that sometimes I keep thinking, I wonder if I could be making some really political work now. And I wonder if I wasn't making this piece for this exhibition this year, I wonder if I wouldn't have done that instead. I kind of feel quite strongly about the whole kind of environmental stuff and all the rest of it. And I wonder if I wouldn't have done that. But yes. I didn't, and I can't, so I'm not.
Yes, no, I understand that. And it's funny that you mentioned about the Extinction Rebellion stuff, because when we were chatting kind of via email about last September, October, and August, whenever it was, you did say you were extremely busy with doing stuff for them. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I'd forgotten about that.
Yes, well, I've been doing a lot of... Well, just part of the kind of group, our local group, and just generally doing stuff. And also I've been making various things and raising money, So it's actually quite nice now to be back solidly with my own practice again. I mean, I'm always keep that going all the time. But, I now can't do anything else. I mean, I'm growing a few vegetables outside in my garden, but mainly it's just doing my own work, which is great.
Right, okay. So it's good that you've been able to focus upon that and to say there's nothing that focuses the mind as much as a deadline, especially for an exhibition. So even though you don't know it's going on, you've still got to create the work, haven't you now? So.
Well, I know, and the thing is, I never normally work to a deadline.
Right.
I've normally always made the work and then found the exhibitions, or they have found me.
Right.
So I work so far ahead. I mean, the work that I'm going to make for this for various things, I make it almost a year ahead if I can. I hate the idea of the stress.
The stress of last minute.
This is the first time I've made something specifically for an exhibition that's coming up soon. I haven't got it ready.
Right,
so, this is another thing that kind of, I'm hoping that the pressure doesn't make me tight and make me kind of feel anxious about it.
Right.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm finding it hard at the moment to get materials that I need, so we'll see.
Now, so it's funny you there just mentioned about materials and technique and so on, because you mentioned there at the start that textiles is part of your range of artistic creation. So I suppose, given that you went to art school and so on, what was it that got you interested in the embroidery and textile art side of things, Jenny?
Well, I think what happened was I was working away when I moved to Somerset, and I had a lovely studio with a big studio group, a rural studio group. It's fantastic. I was making a lot of landscapes, large pastel landscapes. And then I really badly wanted to stop doing that, and I wanted to find my own images.
Right.
So I started making huge, big wire and paper figures, huge, great things in my studio. And then I started doing an MA, which I didn't quite finish, but anyway, and it was called the wrappings. And then, because there were these sort of things wrapped around these figures, and then I started deciding I wanted to concentrate on the wrappings, so I started to make conceptual clothing. I started to make sculptures that were dresses, basically.
Right, yeah.
And so I made a lot of, that's where the dress from the human hair came from, and various sculptures that were, made out of a variety of materials. And I think that's what got me into using textile techniques.
Right.
I mean, I've always made my own clothes, and I've always experimented with making things, and really, really, really enjoyed sewing of all descriptions.
Right.
But this was completely different. I mean, the conceptual clothing, it wasn't really much sewing. It was basically, sticking. Lots of PVA glue and burning things and what have you. And then how I got to start the Darnings was that I made a whole series of mosaic from reclaimed objects and on female forms. This is all on my website.
Yeah.
And then I got asked by the Bristol Embroiderers Guild to do a talk in Bristol. And I suddenly realised they thought I was doing the conceptual clothing, because obviously they wouldn't be interested in me making mistakes. So I thought, right, okay, I'll make a dress. So I went back to making a dress, and I made it with my mum, who had dementia, starting off with dementia, and she and I kind of made it together.
Right.
And she kind of got involved in the whole thing, because I was started to embroider pictures of my family's faces onto this dress. And when I say embroider, I mean that's a very polite term. It's very loose line drawings in thread on this dress.
Yeah.
And she loved watching me make it. You know, she would and because we used to explore the family album, as you do with people with dementia, to kind of help their memory.
Yeah.
So I made the dress, and I took it along to the talk, etc. And then one of the images, I thought, oh, I know, I got an exhibition in a huge, big, high barn, and I had, with some other people, and I had this idea of making this image of my mum, this face, portrait, really large. So I made it really large to suspend it in this thingy, and that's how the Dementia Darling started.
Ah, right.
And I never intended there to be, I mean, there are 15 now.
Yeah.
I never intended there to be, I never intended it to go on so long, but the more I got completely fascinated with making these faces out of just stitching.
Yeah.
And then it sort of just developed from there, really. And lots of things developed in the way that I learned how to make them.
Yeah, and so you were talking about materials there. So what do you use, thread or wool? What's your kind of go-to for doing these?
Sort of wool.
Yeah.
Wools. And the reason is that if you use, like, embroidery threads, it's a very hard line.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to kind of blend these things together, wool is better. And I used to use just lots of wools, that I'd go into the shops and buy, charity shops, buy lots of wools.
Yeah.
And then I discovered, joy of joy, Anchor tapestry wools.
Ah, yes.
Because they have a fantastically huge range of colours. There's sort of 4 different flesh tones in 5 different tones, each of those, So that was really exciting. And so I started making them using that. And then as her dementia developed and she went into a care home, I started to get the 4 little strands that make up the wool and separate them out. So the wools each strand is now separated out from each other and ironed to get rid of the kinks. I mean, absolutely bonkers. I mean,
must take forever.
What a process. And so I have to iron them all, then I have to stretch them over a kind of little bit of card, and then I can use them. So it's quite bonkers, really. But so I use wools. I mean, I have a kind of big collection of various, because people give you stuff.
Yes, of course.
Very often when people's mothers die, they've got big sewing bags.
Yes.
And I love that so much. And I was given a whole load of wools and things. And I've got this one, for instance, I've got this one specific kind of dark bluey pink colour. And it is a wool, but it's very tight. And it's the most perfect thing. When on my mum's face she had little broken veins.
Yes.
Not many, but just the ones. And this is the most perfect thread for using that. So I've got a kind of collection of wools now that I can use if I need something very specific, like that.
Yeah.
I make them I have a stretched canvas that I buy, but then I stretch over that, I stretch something called bobinette, which I buy. It's actually made in a factory near here, the most extraordinary factory I've ever been to. And it's a very, very, very fine voile, sort of netting.
Yes.
But it's very strong, and that is stretched over the canvas, and I sew through that.
Right.
People find that fascinating because it's just, and also you can't see it. If you stretch it over your hand, it's almost transparent. You can't sort of see it it's so fine, but very strong. So that's what I sew into, you see, and that's what holds the threads, because you just sort of sew and cut.
Right, so you're just sewing through the bobinette. You're not going through the stretched canvas as well. Right, I'm going to say, crikey, that'd be really hard work. That,
Well, it would be, and it would make a sort of a hard image.
Yes, it would.
This is just like a little run of lines, and then another little run, and then it's like making a crosshatch drawing, making the darnings. Right. You kind of make pencil marks and you kind of put a few more on top and you kind of blend it all in and things. It feels like making a drawing, really.
Right. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you for explaining that. So, yes, quite an interesting journey into the kind of textile art side of things then, really, from a wide portfolio of artistic techniques that you use anyways.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, with the Darnings, the inspiration was looking after your mum and just experiencing that whole process. And then it's quite interesting now that you're moving that focus onto your journey through aging as well. And the two images that you shared with me, I have to say, they're brilliant. They are hilarious. They're really nice.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, it was it is quite tricky making the images of my mum. I mean, when she was in the care home, I didn't have her permission to use them. Everything I passed by my daughter and my brother because I thought, well, and it was all done with love. There wasn't any problem using them. But I thought there's lots of places I can't go, with those works. I can't show her really, really vulnerable and really and all the rest of it. Whereas with myself, no problem. I mean, I can do what I like.
Yes.
And so I made the first two, making the stupidest faces. And of course, because they're so large, they're quite arresting. Yeah. And they become something different. They're not as ridiculous as they could be. They're almost more, but it's something, I don't know quite what it is anyway. I've made, how many have I made of those? 6 now of those. And I've got another 3 planned that I really wanted to start this year, but I can't, obviously, because I've got this other thing to do. But they're already planned. And I think that's, it's just confronting one's own aging is a necessary thing, I think. I don't know. I don't know if I'll keep on going. That might become a bit too difficult. Oh, God.
It's an interesting subject, though. I mean, even just the lockdown thing, occasionally dye my hair and then it seems to fade very quickly, does the dye. Yeah. And so and I have it cut very frequently. So there's never any regrowth type issues. But then, of course, I don't know when I last had my hair cut now, 9-10 weeks or something. I would have normally had it cut at least twice, nearly 3 times by now. And so I'm now looking at this white-haired lady staring at me in the mirror, and I keep saying, well, I knew my hair was had gone white. I'm 55, but, and it's been like this for a long time, really. So I'm now at that verge of, well, do I bother to dye it again, or do I just say, well, stuff it, that's it now, I can't be bothered, and this is me? It's like, and I'm sure I'm not the only person thinking about, well, what shall I do with my hair?
Oh, I know, mine's absolutely horrendous, but I'm quite good at cutting mine myself. And so I might have a go at that. But, oh no, all these things. And it's just one's whole image, I mean, I'm 69, and I'm just thinking, right, I'm going to be 70 next year, and I don't know how it ever happened. You're thinking, right, it would be very interesting if I kept going at these darnings until I was 80 or 90. If I made one a year, say, I think it would be quite an interesting exercise to do.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant, that, wouldn't it? Keep you busy anyway, Jenny.
Well, I know. Yes, exactly.
No, I think that's a fascinating idea, actually. So really, in terms of high points, obviously the Darnings must be high up there, if not the high point. Or have you got anything else that you would, that you've thought to yourself, this is a real high point for me?
Oh, it's such a good question, this one. And really, I think everything that I'm sort of proceeding with is kind of the high point. Yeah. The Darnings have completely taken me by surprise. Yeah. I forgot to mention in the bio that I actually sent some work to China a couple of years ago. 3 pieces went to China to a university exhibition at Tsinghua University, and that was and I thought, my goodness, what would my mum think? This is extraordinary. Yeah. Here's me shipping work to China for this. It was a nightmare, I have to say, getting work to China.
Logistically, I should imagine it was, yes.
It was horrible, and it was really stressful, and I had to pay all this money because it all got embargoed. And anyway, that's another issue. Yeah. And then what happened? Oh, I don't know. Every time, and then the knitting and stitching shows. Yeah. That was just fantastic. I met so many people. I got to travel around and see things. And I just thought, I make my work because it's something I've always done. I mean, I have actually sold one of the Dementia Darnings, but they're not for sale. I make them for exhibition, but everything is a bonus that I make. And I've had really some super opportunities. And I think so, high point. I mean, one of the biggest high points, I don't know if this is the question, I'm jumping in again, is that next year I've got 2 exhibitions planned in cathedrals.
Wow.
Now, this is something that happened quite by accident. I've got an exhibition in Norwich Cathedral for a couple of months in, I think it's March and April, February and March, ending in the middle of April. And that was because they saw my work at the knitting and stitching show.
Yeah.
I went to Hereford, and the cathedral there, I just thought, oh, I'm going to go. And it was just the most beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cathedral. I wandered around it, met this lovely man. I don't know if he was a verger or what he was, but we had spent ages talking about my work and all the rest of it. And then he put me in contact with something, and I've got an exhibition there as well next year. And I know, and I think this is extraordinary. It's just weird. It's just, and you know, you make this work, and I work really very hard at doing it all. You sort of think you do not know what's going to happen. You know, and you just think you put it out there, and it sort of has its own life.
Do you know, that's really interesting you saying that, Jenny, because I think quite often people, and it doesn't really matter at what level you're working at, if what you're doing stays in your studio or stays in your lounge, no one's ever going to see it, and you'll never know the impact that you can make on people. Now, obviously, you've discovered with your Darnings, you know, the impact. I mean, as I was saying, I saw those at Harrogate Knitting and Stitching Show, and I was stood there in tears because it just brought the whole process of, well, crikey, you know, this I can see my mum already, you know, from the lovely picture of the young girl, in effect, you know, they all had a lovely photo at 21, didn't they? And she's got a gorgeous black and white one. And then you can just see the whole thing going down. So the emotional response to that. But I think, as I say, it doesn't matter what it is. If you don't share what you're doing or don't put it in places or go out and find places, you'll never, ever know what impact you could have on somebody. And I think that's the sad thing. You know, is that you just don't know what's going to happen, which is so exciting.
It's so exciting, and also getting people's response, and then people talk to me about their work and what they're doing about various things, and you know, that's just magic, because as an artist, you spend all your time in your studio on your own. You know, you kind of make yourself get up and go out somewhere and you go for a walk. A bit like, in fact, my life now is not very different from, you know, in lockdown. It's normal, except that I can't go and see my little family, and I don't get to see my friends so much. But, you know, it's just amazing when you start doing it. And I remember when I was doing the Darnings, I worked really hard for about 3 or 4 years. And I just made and made and made and made and made, and I didn't show anything. And then it started to kind of get known, and people became interested in them. And then that's how it sort of happened. But you have to put so much time in, I think, with that kind of thing to actually get something going. But I mean, when I made them because it helped me to deal with my mum's decline. I didn't know what else to do. I had to give up my studio because I had to give up my work, so I didn't have enough money to pay for a studio. So I had to work from home. I had to change the way I worked because I was working on the mosaics. And somehow, you know, you just have to kind of just go with things and just, you know, it just sort of happens.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, the journey that just having to change what happens. And it quite often works out for the best. You finish up in a different and better direction than what you thought you was ever going to do. So, I think that's brilliant, that. So then, Jenny, moving from high points, have you got any stories? And we just do these with a bit of a laugh and lots of love as to when something didn't quite go as planned, and you would possibly describe as a disaster, and what did you learn from that experience? Have you got anything to share with us?
That's a really, really good question too. And I think that only once ever have I chucked away a piece of work, and that was many, many years ago, and that was I think probably about 15, 20 years ago, and I didn't like something I was making, and I threw it away. And I've remembered that so strongly, and I've just regret it so much, because it was only a small kind of painting on a piece of paper. It wasn't anything grand. But now I don't have disasters as such, but things often, if I'm making a darning or something like that, and it doesn't work, when you sort of turn it up the other way and you start to review, then I just use that as an opportunity, and then I kind of dive into it and pull out lots of threads, make it look like it's moth-eaten. I, you know, do all sorts of different things to it. I kind of change it, and then that kind of develops a narrative of the piece.
Right.
For instance, when I was doing the dresses, I can remember making one dress that was a bit turgid, you know, and I just thought, no, so I got a blowtorch, a little blowtorch, and wet it all. I have a thing of water in one hand and the blowtorch in the other, and just singe it, and then, you know, and then that creates a huge narrative.
Yeah.
And then you've sort of got all sorts of images come up with this kind of partly singed dress. You've got all these different layers of netting, and then the wet makes the glue run, and therefore you've got all sorts of interesting patterns there. And then you start to think, right, there's little caves opening up in this dress because of the burnt bit of it. And so, you know, so a disaster for me is an opportunity.
Brilliant.
I mean, that sounds so pretentious, and I know that. But I think it's the only way. It's too depressing. I mean, I couldn't have a disaster with the Darlings because they take so long.
Yeah.
So I have to kind of just try and decide that that's how it was meant to be. I really did. Yes. But that's my kind of philosophy, is just to kind of run with it and change something and roll it up and stamp on it and bury it in the earth for a week.
Yeah.
And then shake it up and see what suggests itself after that.
Oh, dear, I love that. I thought when you said got your blowtorch out, I thought, hey, something's on fire here.
Well, and it causes quite a lot of problems. Yeah, all sorts of things. I mean, I remember once I was covering a dress with beeswax. I had proper beeswax.
Yeah.
And then I started doing this, and then because it all melted and did funny things, then I got all these bees swarming into my studio because they could smell the beeswax. And it was just so ridiculous.
Oh, I love that. Oh, what a brilliant story that is. That's it.
Well, I've made this dress out of human hair, and I've had it for years and years and years. And somebody said, well, I've got a bit of a problem with moths. And they said, oh, well, moths, they'll live off human hair.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, oh, my goodness, what am I going to do? And I'm trying to think ahead, thinking, well, if it gets moth-eaten, how am I going to describe that in another narrative, you know? So, oh, you know, crazy.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Do you have unfinished objects then, Jenny? You know, since you're doing kind of, you know, often we have people who've been doing some embroideries on the go for ages and ages and ages, and yours is quite a different sort of work. Is that a concept that applies to you, UFOs?
No, I never have unfinished pieces. People sort of ask me very often, you know, if I can sort of send samples. I never, ever, ever do. I always, if I have an idea, I start it on the finished piece always.
Right.
Because I think when I used to make big paintings long time ago, you know, if you do a drawing first, the drawing always captures the essence of it, and when the painting it's turgid, I'd much rather kind of just get everything out on the piece and then work it all out on that.
Right.
Rather than do samples or anything like that. And I don't do any workshops or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I get asked to, but I don't.
Right.
I used to.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of workshops, but not to do with textiles, mainly painting.
Right.
Because I taught for a long time.
Right.
So,
I see.
So my practice has never been about selling my work. I've always taught to fund it, you know, to fund my practice.
Right, I see. Yeah, and it's the samples and the workshops that I think are the main, offenders in terms of creating loads of UFOs, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. I don't have the space to store stuff, you know, that's the thing. No.
Now, you kind of alluded to this a bit when you were talking about your lockdown experience in terms of managing your creative time. So this is your art practice. And you did mention about at first feeling a bit kind of adrift and then going back to your routine. So, you know, what is your typical way for managing your creative time, Jenny?
Well, I'm very, very self-disciplined and a bit fierce about it. I start work mainly about 9 in the mornings.
Right.
And then I work solidly until lunchtime. And then I don't work at the beginning of the afternoon, but I very often work another spell after that. I think the thing is that sitting down, it's very repetitive work, as in you're sitting down, you know, sewing away.
Yeah.
You know, you get shoulder strain.
Yes.
You know, I can't do much more than that. And also it gets stale.
Yeah.
And I found that I'd rather leave it at a place where I'm kind of excited to come back to it the next day. And because I have to iron all the wool, I have to, you know, the afternoon and the evening, I might spend just preparing all the materials for the next day.
Ah, right, yeah. So it's a mindless task for the afternoon.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
and I'll sit there and, you know, divide all this wool up. Honestly, I do wonder sometimes. And prepare it all.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
And because my studio is in my house now, I find I can go and can look at the work. I tend to look at it a lot.
Yeah.
And then, I'll take a kind of day or two off a week.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because the work, they take me 3 or 4 months to make. And if I don't work hard at them, they just drag,
It's never going to get finished, is it, at that rate?
No, exactly. So that's why I really try.
Yeah.
It sounds very virtuous, and but friends are quite good. They know that I work in the mornings. It's just that that's the best way for me.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't have anything else on my time. So I might as well, do it as I want.
Yeah, and you've raised a good point there about training friends and relatives, because there's always that temptation of, you're just an artist and you're not doing anything at home.
Yep.
I can pop round any time. I get this from working from home as well. I just thought I'd pop round. Anyway, I've kind of trained everybody. No, don't bother popping round. I'm busy. In the nicest way.
Do you work all day?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yes,
So your whole day is... So they're allowed to come and see you in the evenings or something at the weekends.
It can be difficult though, but I make sure that at lunchtime I'll get up and even have it my online calendar, lunch and a walk. I run in the morning anyway quite often, and then I will just get up and go for a walk. Or if I'm stuck on something, I just go for a walk and I walk along the seafront. So sometimes I'm sure people think, she's back again. Has she got nothing better to do than walk about on the seafront? It's just thinking about things. So so it is important, I think, to train our friends and relatives that just because if we was in an office in town, you wouldn't be able to pop in and see us, and actually you can't pop in and see us either. So in a nice way. Yeah.
Well, I think so. So I think it's just the way that it is, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I'm glad that you're the same. But also, it's like taking walks. I tend to every hour I'll get up and I'll just walk up the shops and back down again, not to get anything. I can't do that now. Well, don't do that now. But just because you seize up.
Oh, awful,
but you go for a run, goodness. Oh.
I'll tell you what I do a lot more as well. I was given a Fitbit at Christmas, and I love it. And so I've got it set for like every 50 minutes, so 10 minutes to the hour, it beep, beep. And it's like, go on, get moving. And so I get up and I've got this hilarious route around the house. I walk from one side to the other, and then Ryan sometimes joins in, my son. He thinks it's hilarious. So we've got this synchronised route where we're going across the house and then up and down the hallway. We do this to make just 5 minutes to pass the day. So.
But that's a really good, and that's a Fitbit that's kind of got you so organised.
Yeah, because
I have heard of them.
Yeah, because I get engrossed in what I'm doing, and then I think, I'll move in a minute, and then another hour has gone by, and it's like it's no good at all for me. So so this beep beep, and right, go on, get up, do your 250 steps or whatever, and it makes me go and move, and then I might do a few stretches or something, and then I'll get a cup of tea, and then I'll come back and start my next kind of 50-minute cycle of works.
Oh my goodness, that sounds a really good idea. I might try and do that. Mind you, you know how bad I am at tech, but I'm sure I could manage.
You can manage one of those. Or just set a timer on your phone just to ding off every 50 minutes or something.
I don't even have a smartphone. I have a little old-fashioned phone. I'm really useless. Mind you, that's the only thing I really regret about lockdown. I'm waiting for this one to die on me.
Yeah.
It only cost me 10 quid.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd got a proper iPhone before this started, because I realised I could have done WhatsApp and everything, and I'm missing out. So that's my next big excitement.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you are. Something to look forward to.
That and Zoom.
Yeah. So anything else then, Jenny, as we wrap up for today in terms of, you've mentioned various things that you're working for next year. So anything else that you've got looming that you haven't mentioned for next year?
No, I don't think so. One thing that has just happened is that there's a website called the absentgallery.co.uk.
All right.
And they have just done an online virtual interactive exhibition of the Dementia Darnings.
Ah, lovely.
And so if anybody is interested, it's really lovely, actually. You kind of go in and you press little buttons and it kind of goes different ways, and you can zoom in and zoom out.
How fascinating.
And that's quite nice. So I thought, and that's just been up online the last week, and I thought it was interesting that that's happened at the same time that we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And I thought, goodness, even in lockdown, you see all these funny opportunities happen.
Oh, there's things around every corner.
Yeah, there is, and it's amazing, really. So that's it. Otherwise, no, not really. I think that's probably it. The cathedrals next year.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they happen.
Yeah.
But we'll see. And then the Horniman Museum, I think, that's happening next year or the year after. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Right then, Jenny. That's been absolutely fantastic. So much going on.
Thank you.
It's been fabulous chatting to you, and I'm really pleased that you've mentioned about the Absent Gallery as well, because then anybody who hasn't seen the Darlings will be able to see some of those, because they are really such an emotive body of work. That's really
Thank
nice.
you.
That has happened at the same time. As you say, one of those strange coincidences of life.
Yes.
Who'd have thought
Yes.
it, eh?
Thank you so much, Sue. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.